Hey, how you doing today? This is my second one I'm recording today. Like I said, today was kind of a clean up my desk, and I've had a pile of books off to this one side that I'm like, I just have to do my little book report on these. I have to. So I have the opportunity to do it today, and I'm taking full advantage of it, and hopefully I'm doing it for your benefit. So let's go on this journey together and see what happens. I was actually toying with the idea of whether to do even like this first book now or not, because I do have a bunch of them, and kind of like how I did like the Sandman and such, I was going to do them all at one time. I might still do that in lieu of doing every book as I read them, but I'll get more to that in the background. Um, but this was the one I just finished reading recently, so I'm going to share it with you. I will confess that this one might be a little bit more about Jim Butcher's genre and this world and how he puts it together, etc. Might not be so heavily about the specific story. I'll do my best, but just in case you're looking for a good synopsis of the story, you may not get that right here. So, fair warning, we're on the same page before you even go a second further. So, I'm probably cheating a little bit, but I guess, I'm a guy and there might be some people in the world that would expect me to cheat. So I guess I'm not letting those people down. Let me do a little background first of why even this, and then I'll get into everything else. So, many, many, many moons ago, I had a particular friend. Unfortunately, no longer, but I have a particular friend who had also another friend who was just gaga over the Dresden Files. Could not get enough, loved it to death. And I think after a certain time, he might have gotten her involved in it as well. So I kind of knew about this, like, say, 20, 25 years ago. But at the time, I had plenty to read myself, so I didn't really get into it. But it was always, like, way in the back of my mind to, like, maybe check it out someday. I know that there was a TV show about this that was on Sci-Fi Channel, I'm going to guess. Um, the books themselves started coming out in 2000. So it's within the last 20, 30 years you can find the first season. Sci Fi Channel only lasted one season, so it kind of tells you that didn't do too well. I personally didn't watch it, didn't know what it was at the time, so it didn't strike me as something to watch. I have later learned people are very clear to say do not watch the Dresden Files TV show. It is partially tangentially related to the surface to this material in these books. So it kind of uses like someone didn't read the books and figured it was about this and made a show and blah blah blah. I'm not gonna say much more about that. I'm kind of done. But now fast forward 20, 25 years from friends who were definitely into this. And now I have me, and I have my own delusions of grandeur that I may get into writing novels and start making my own fantasy worlds or whatever genre it is, but fictitious worlds. Um, and I like to try to do a little bit of research on, like, what should I be ready for? What does a writer actually do sometimes when they're trying to gear up themselves to page one or whatever concept's in their mind? And I stumbled across on YouTube. There's a Brandon Sanderson, who is a well-known fiction writer. I think he does more of the sci-fi fantasy as well. I personally did not know anything about him when I started watching this, but he had a 13 episode lecture series that's available on YouTube of when he was teaching a fantasy and science fiction writing course out in the Midwest. Um, Again, I didn't know who he was, didn't know about this, but stumbled upon it. I have read certain fiction of sci-fi and fantasy, but I'm not like a genreist. So it's not like, oh, you have to read all of them. That's all you're going to read. No, my bookshelf behind me has plenty of eclectic novels on there. I have some sections of like one writer only, but it's all over the world. Um, so he has this. I don't know if I'm piecing this together very well, but he has his 13 episode lecture series on how to write science fiction and fantasy. And it's a very, very interesting and a very, very informative class. What they'll even do is they'll break up certain sections into like 3 lecture, series. Like, for instance, if he's doing world building, he'll have 2 lectures on world building that he talks about all the different areas that you want to talk about. And then the third class will be complete Q&A with the students. And then might he go into character or plot, do 2 episodes of teaching, telling anecdotes, and then ask the class for their questions. So it's actually very good. Even if I'm not going to write, just to hear about writing was very good from a reader perspective, and even getting to these things. Now, why do I even bring this up? He has an anecdote in the middle of one of the lectures about Jim Butcher and about things like, magic systems, they call them. Are they hard or are they soft and yada yada, and should you actually have like a cost to using magic, and how much history do you need, and this, that, and the other. But I guess Jim Butcher was on a panel one time, so goes the story, and someone was like, oh, you know something? Even the best novel idea in the world, written by the worst person that can possibly write a book, will still be a bestseller, because the idea is so good. But a bad idea is a bad idea regardless of who you give it to. And I guess from what I understand, Jim Butcher was there, and he goes, no, that's not true at all. A good idea in a bad writer's hand will become a bad book. And a bad idea in a great writer's hand will become a fantastic book. So he kind of bet the guy. He goes, I tell you what, you give me 2 of the most incongruous, horrible ideas out there, and I'll write an award-winning book. So the guy answers, he goes, okay, how about taking the Lost Legion of Rome and Pokemon? So Jim Butcher takes these 2 ideas, goes back home, write, I think, what's called the Codex Alera, and it's a book series, and it is award-winning. So it's one of those things like, this guy has that kind of attitude as a person who's also being a writer, and he's giving you this kind of fiction, and just, you can know that you'll enjoy it. Because that is a talent, and I'm so good. So, I've listened to this lecture series pretty often, and sometimes I'll even start listening to it again when I'm outside, like mowing the lawn, because it'll keep me company for like an hour or so. And now I decided, listen, it's probably time to go look at the Dresden Files. It's always been in the back of my mind from 20, 25 years ago, and this guy's talking about what this guy can do in a convention and what he can do with bad ideas, make good things. Hey, let me give it a shot. So I went out there to eBay and I looked around, and I actually find someone selling like a 15-book set at a pretty reasonable price. So I just bought it now because I'm pretty sure I'm going to like it. And I can say it confidently enough because I did audiobook like the first few, and I did enjoy them. So I'm here to tell you about how much I enjoyed them and what's actually in them that you can enjoy. And then when I'm done, I'll either put them on my bookshelf, or if I have no room, I'll put it back on there for eBay for more than I bought them for. And then I'm good to go. So on with the show. What are the Dresden Files? Well, the Dresden Files is pretty much like a poor Harry Potter who's now a private eye. And I'm sure there's people out there that are probably just loathe the usage of a reference to Harry Potter for this. But, guess what? I did it. It's out there. You got to put a wizard out there in some fashion, and that's what this guy is. So who is this guy? Dresden is his name. His full name is actually Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden, which you might hear that and just kind of roll your eyes, but they kind of write it into the story. He's the son of a circus magician, and when he was born, his father named him after 3 great magicians, adding Dresden as the surname to the back of him. Now, what can Harry do? He knows some magic. A lot of what you see him do during the book is object-oriented kind of stuff, is pretty much common. Like, he has a blasting rod that he used to focus the energy, and it will actually shoot at people, a magic whatever. I won't say bolt, but, a force. And he gets him out of whatever he has to get out of. He's got potions, and And then sometimes he has other things with him, like paraphernalia, like a big thing of chalk. And he'll use the chalk to, like, draw a circle on the ground and make a little protective barrier for him. Or he has other things, like he carries a pocket knife so he can cut his hand or cut his arm and get some blood out of there. Because some magic he needs is blood magic, and it might help him summon something or even repel some things too. Who knows? So he knows some stuff. But again, he's kind of a down on your luck kind of guy as a private eye. So he's not a great wizard. He knows enough to get himself out of jams, but he gets himself into jams pretty often. So now we can't keep using the same magic technique to get out every single time. It's got to be like, oh, now my blasting rod is knocked away from me. I got to find another thing to do or to use in its place and just summon from within me things I shouldn't be, because the cost of it on my health would be more than just using a blasting rod. But all in all, he's got his few things. He knows his few things. He makes do. And seeing how he gets out of a jam is fantastic to read. It keeps the pages turning. When I'm reading this, I am flying through it. What else I can say is this all takes place primarily in Chicago. So it's not a typical New York based. We're in the center of America here. So Chicago, he actually has an in with a woman who's a detective in the Chicago PD. That sometimes, and actually this woman, she believes in what he sees and what he can do. So when she does get like a homicide that looks a little off kilter, we'll call him in as a consultant. And maybe he can magic an answer up there or follow leads that she can't, because it doesn't really connect the dots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for like a DA to prosecute or someone. Also in these books, they talk a lot about there's a certain like council of wizards. And they're like the ruling body of all magicians and all wizards that are out there. And our friend Harry, he's not well liked by them. And in fact, this council actually has like an officer of the court, this warden, so to speak, who is constantly eyeing Harry Dresden, waiting for him to like use magic the wrong way, or to take a person's life with it, or something like that. Any reason he can use to pull out this long sword and pretty much either chop him in half or haul him before the council. And because he's dogged by this guy, he can sometimes be limited on what he wants to use magically to help figure out a case. Because if he's used one way, this guy that wants to nail him to the wall is going to say he screwed up, instead of him just using it to figure information out. So one of those things is, the magic in this world has rules. A wizard can't just do whatever they want and, create something out of thin air or anything like that. They've literally got to, like, follow the rules or get put in wizard jail, have some other kind of problems happen. They don't want people taking their powers and going rogue or going to be like some evil Sauron wizard or something like that. It's all a decent part of the world building, which you'll have to read when you go through this. And I do suggest that you do. Now, not to say nothing about this book is the story specifically in this introductory book is the CPD calls him over. Need your help on a homicide. And when he gets there, the bedroom is just completely, just blood splattered everywhere. And these two people that were in the middle of what they were doing were on the bed. It's like their chests exploded. So the cops are like, no idea what would have done that. Fairly certain it wasn't a, simultaneously double heart attack. Let's call the wizard in there. Why not? And then as you go through, Harry Dresden trying to like chase down the leads or even try to find other people in his magical realm that might be able to tap into an information source to help him, he's got to go to a vampire house and talk to the queen that lives there, all while trying to keep his blood inside him. You've got a reporter this woman who's constantly on his heels just to get some dirt, because she actually reports to like a wizarding magazine. They call it the Arcane. So he doesn't want to give up, hey, magic is definitely out there and tell the whole world about this. But the woman's kind of sexy, and they kind of got like a little side thing going on there. So it's like he's juggling, and you kind of see him juggle from time to time. You see Harry go over to like a wizard's bar, and they talk about some rules about that and how it's set up, and there's 13 pillars in the thing, and it actually makes things, like there's a reason for that, why they hold up the roof with 13 pillars. And then you'll also go into things like fairies and mobsters. Hell, monsters. They're all in there. So Jim Butcher can pack a lot into a novel. And this novel itself, we're looking at about 375 pages, give or take. Which, like I said, you will just page after page turn them fast as you're reading it. It's a good time. It's a little hard to get much into the summary of the story without it sounding too 30,000 feet, because a lot of the time Harry's following like weak leads. By weak leads, try one more time. By weak leads, I mean thin leads. And you're learning the lay of the land, especially in the first book, of what are the rules, who are the people, what can he do. So you're along for the journey. And he's telling you what you could expect, or what he hopes doesn't happen. And as you go through it step by step, page by page, you figure it out. And the connection on how these people were killed and who's doing it and what it means to him, when that all comes together, it's a real, like, wow kind of a moment. Like when you finally get like that villain's story and how he was able to do it and what this meant, like from the earlier encounters to the finale encounters, it really comes together in such a great way. I have to give this like thumbs up, and you can hear me saying that, or you can feel me saying that along the way as well. But what else can I say about this one? While you're going through it, you will encounter things like his investigation hits a dead end. So he calls the Fae for help. And it goes into some pretty decent detail how on the spot he can create a trap. And he's going to try to get like a fairy to come to him and then go out and do his bidding for him. Not in a slave type thing, but like almost like a barter system. And it goes into a little detail of like the necessary ingredients for the trap and how it has to be set and what the entrapment spell is like and how it's necessary to be that as it happens. Similar thing happens actually when he makes potions. He's got an ally in his house that helps him with knowledge to make potions. And it's not just like one of these simple eye of newt, wing of bat type of scenarios. They actually have a meaning of how they make like a potion. So, for instance, there's a love potion, okay? I'm going off script from the book here, but just in general. He has to make a love potion. Well, here's the ingredients. Let's start with like a base, and maybe he has some wine mixed with vermouth. I need to have that basic fluid that things will then go in and infuse one by one. But the things that he adds to it are 1 part sunset. Well, you can see a sunset. You don't have a sunset. But, hey, he happens to have a bottle on the shelf with some sunsets in there. They find a way of like how it comes out and gets into a potion. So it's like, yeah, sunsets are romantic. You can have a great time with a woman or a man during a sunset. Adds to the potion. Another ingredient might be the sigh after a first kiss from a love. Again, intangible, but an ingredient. And it sounds like an important one, and he finds a way to get that in some fashion. He might need a feather from Cupid's arrow, but then he'll bind it all together with the ashes of honey. Didn't know honey can burn to the point that you can make ashes. And maybe you can't. But for this book and in this universe, you can. So the ingredients are mainly concept-related ingredients. Not what physically brings it together. I remember there's a short story by Stephen King called The Mangler. Old, huge, monstrous looking laundry machine. And I think what happens is, in his rules of potion making, over time, the ingredients to give this thing sentience and a life are dropped into the machine. And it didn't matter that if someone dropped ingredient A in 1820 and ingredient B didn't come out until 1880, that other stuff was dropped in between. Those ingredients were hitting a spell along the way completely by accident. And that was how he made potions. Well, Jim Butcher does it like this. Concept related. It's pretty wild. It actually kind of reminds me of a funny thing I had heard. There's a new trend going out there nowadays on how some people are playing that kids game Guess Who, where you have like all the people in front of you and you're trying to guess, like, does your person have like blonde hair? Are they wearing a hat? Do they wear glasses? Is it man or female? Narrowing down the field until it's one left, and you guess if the opponent has that on their card. Well, now there's a new version of the game that some of like the college kids are playing, and it's a subjective question, Guess Who, which is hysterical. It's the same game, but instead of saying, do you have a hat, you say things like, does your person look like they hang out in a Starbucks just to write their script? And you have to look at your people to figure like, which of these people would never be doing that? Judging them from the beginning. Does your person say that they're 5'11", but they're actually 5'9"? Does your person look like they would ask you what you watch on television just so they can tell you what they watch on television? I've done this before. It is freaking hysterical. You can watch some videos online too. They're freaking hysterical to watch. But just like this potion making, it's concept related, it's subjective, and it does get you to an end result. And as enjoyable as it is to watch or play that game, it's as enjoyable to read than put the potion together in the book. So, bottom line, it's a contemporary adventure with the addition of the magical realm. One thing I do like that it does, and I mentioned it very briefly earlier, was magic has rules in this book. I think it is more of a hard magic. You know, there's a whole section in the Brandon Sanderson class that I watched where they talk about hard magic systems and soft magic systems. And what it comes down to is there a cost to do what you have to do to be as powerful or not powerful as you are? You know, for instance, in The Lord of the Rings, most of the magic that Gandalf does is almost off-screen. You don't really see it as much or what happens to him directly. I know he does go from robe A to robe B to robe C, whatever else, in his journey, so you actually see it affects him. But his power is unknown as far as, like, how far he can put it. Whereas, if you're watching, say, a show like Stranger Things, they have that girl, 11. When 11 uses her power, her nose bleeds instantly, or she'll pass out from the effort. So she has a strong cost to do what she's doing. So you know she can't just all episode long, I'm just use my power and figure out what we need to figure out and get to where we need to get to. She has to like work her way up to that, you know, have a great meal, be well rested, because I know I'm going to do this for like 20 minutes long. So, that's all I have to say about this. I hope I was able to give you some information about, you know, about Jim Butcher himself, enough about Stormfront to maybe make you interested in reading this, or if you have already read this, maybe you kind of like the synopsis, and you can say, hey, did a good job, or maybe you hated it, and I totally missed the point. I know that this whole series goes very deep, like, into that council, and there's two different sides of it, and I think there's, like, 3 head or monarchs on each side, and each one has a knight, and each one has a blah, 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 whatever else. That's for the overall. Hardly any of that's in this specific book. But I know it exists already, so. Hope you had a good time. In the meantime, I might be done for today. It's been long enough on this episode as it is. So, happy reading. Enjoy yourself. like, subscribe. I guess I'm supposed to say those kind of things at the end of everything. But let's get some numbers up. And let's do this more often. All right. You take care now.